At what time does good afternoon become good evening? So I'll give my answer, and then we'll look through some of the replies here. I don't want my answer to be affected by the replies. Some things are totally in your head, right? Some things are objective, like what time is it? Well, if we both look at the clock and it's 5:28, then it's 5:28. Unless 1 minute passes, in which case now it's 5:29. But that's objective. And if you ask someone who went to a movie how it was and they say it was great, that's how they felt about it. If you ask them for an adjective, they say it was exciting, that's how they felt about it. If you ask another person, they say it was awful, it sucked, that's how they felt about it. So those are sort of totally free opinions. Now, what about for something that has a general definition that is not totally free, but that still has fuzzy lines around it? Let me explain what I mean by that, okay? If you watch a very serious movie that's supposed to be very serious and has no humor in it at all, because it's a drama, it's totally serious, and then someone says, that was the best comedy I've ever seen, then many people are going to think that either that person has something wrong with them, maybe they have a weird sense of humor, you thought that was funny, right? Or perhaps that they don't know what the word comedy means and what a comedy movie is. Now, in the same way, that's because definition of comedy, jokes. It's meant to be funny. There are funny things happening. So this person doesn't understand the definition. But it is fuzzy because you could have a serious movie that has funny moments for people, right? It's a little fuzzy, but it's kind of defined. Well, things like afternoon, evening, and morning are defined too, right? But there is some fuzziness as well. Now, when it's morning and afternoon, the line is pretty clearly at 12. So if it's 11:30 and someone says good morning, that's going to be okay. But if they say good afternoon, some people might correct them and say, you mean morning? Because it's not afternoon yet, because it's 11:30, and afternoon means exactly 12, noon. So there's a clear line. And the word afternoon means after noon, after 12. So because that line is very clear, there's less confusion and less fuzziness. But when we get later in the day, the line between evening and afternoon is not so clear, and people have different ideas about what evening is, right? I feel like 4:30 p.m. is afternoon. But some people are going to lump that in with evening. I don't think that 6 p.m. is afternoon. Some people might have that feeling that it's still afternoon. And so there is a general idea that afternoon is when the sun is still high in the sky and it is after 12 o'clock. And maybe if it's during the week, people are still at work, right? And you're at work, people are saying good afternoon, things like that, right? And then 8 o'clock, 7 o'clock, no one's going to say afternoon. So there are clear cases. It's 3 p.m., good afternoon. If someone says good evening at 3 p.m., what do you mean? Did I say 3? Yeah, if someone says good evening at 3 p.m., that's crazy. If someone says good afternoon at 7:30 or 8, what is wrong with you? So there we can sort of start to narrow it down a little bit. All right, what if someone says good evening at 4 p.m.? I feel like that's afternoon, but I'm not going to say, hey, what's wrong with you? Why'd you say evening? If someone says good afternoon at 5:30, again, many people are going to feel that that's a little weird, but they're going to let it slide at 5:30 probably. So it isn't a hard line, but I think it's somewhere between 4:30 and 6. Maybe 4 and 6, we can say. Somewhere between 4 and 6, there's this fuzzy area where you could use either evening or afternoon. Outside of that, if you're on the earlier side of 4, it's totally weird if you say evening. And on the other side of 6, once it gets to 6:37, it's totally weird if you say afternoon. But in that space, how do you feel about it? I think it's subjective. I think that's it. But let's see what people are saying here. Let's see what people say. There is no hard rule. This is a native speaker. Gil Gunderson. People use whatever they want, but in general, it happens when the workday changes. I think that's fair. When people go home from work, yeah, generally speaking, that's right. Usually between 5 and 6. However, it's common for people to use them in random and arbitrary ways. I don't think it's random. I think nobody is going to say evening at 2 p.m. Nobody. It's not random. Okay, I wouldn't go by light. Where I am right now, it's still light at 10:30 p.m. It's definitely not afternoon. I agree with that. I think going by light doesn't work. And you can't go by light. 6 p.m. in my opinion. I think that's fair. That's kind of on that line. People have different opinions about this. 5 p.m. IMO. Yeah, I think 5 p.m. I personally feel that 5 p.m. is the line. That's what I use. That's my little rule. I'll say good afternoon until 5 p.m. After 5 p.m., I will say good evening. That's how I do it. We have some interesting... This person says 4 p.m. Someone says 6 o'clock. So my instinct was right. It's generally between 5 and 6 o'clock, or 4 and 6 o'clock is when people have the sense that it changes over. And I think that's... I feel validated. I feel like I live in a culture that makes sense to me. Honestly, it doesn't matter. Technically, if I had to give an outline, I would say good morning is dawn to noon. Noon to 5 is good afternoon. 5 and beyond is good evening. And we only say good night if you're saying goodbye. I think this is great. Good on you, Sekadora. This is, I think, a great way to say it. You don't say good night when you're saying hello to someone. You only say good night when you're saying goodbye. 6 p.m. or sunset. 5 p.m. no debate. There is a debate. You have to admit it. All right, so I think it's interesting that some things are flexible like this, where you have a fuzzy line. Again, if you say that not funny movie is hilarious, people are going to look at you weird. And if you say good evening at 2 p.m., people are going to look at you weird. And if you say good afternoon at 6 p.m. or 7, people are going to look at you weird. So it's not about it being defined clearly. It's about getting a feel for what's appropriate. And if you don't want to be looked at in a weird way, then you have to kind of get a feeling for that. Pretty interesting in my opinion.